Hi everybody, how you doing? I hope you're enjoying this channel. If you are, press like and subscribe. Pod and deliver, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye. Before I get to the second half of our discussion on the Carver short story, in my excitement in talking about his stories, I forgot to give a little bio about Carver. He was a short story master. He was not interested in the novel. I know some people think, well, you write short stories first and then you write the novel, like it's a the minor leagues before you write the novel. According to Carver, the short story was the major leagues. And I meant to bring up my part of the reason I brought up my professor, Dr. Charles Bay, is he felt the same thing. He thought it was a mistake that people thought that short stories were kind of like easy. Some people, including Carver, thought that the short story was a higher art form. Now, it's an opinion, but it's persuasive. And when you read these, you really feel like the that it's something that stays with you, and you have a shorter time to do it, so more of the sentences and the title and the characters punch. Uh, he lived a very short life, in my opinion. He passed away at 50, but he was celebrated in his day, which is great. He's one of these who he passed and people discovered him. He was celebrated as the greatest short story writer of America, even in his 30s. And he was also celebrated as a professor. People write about what he was as a professor. He taught at Iowa for a while, briefly, and also at Syracuse. There's a really interesting novelist named Murakami, who it's strange because Murakami's novels are very abstract and surreal, but his favorite writer is Carver, and he pilgrimaged from Japan to Washington to talk to Carver and to meet him. And he translated Carver into Japanese, which is really strange because Carver's very different style, but he appreciated Carver. Carver passed away at age 50 in the early 80s. Okay, Mr. Gerhardt, Jacob Gerhardt, what other story would you like to discuss?
One little thing about that Murakami is that Carver's stories can be taken, like Jacob said, so many different ways that it's easy for everyone to like it.
Mm.
It's easy for everyone to say that's interesting, or we all have our genres that we enjoy more. Maybe somebody says, "Oh, that's not the way writing really is," or "That's the easy way out." And he also studied with John Gardner, I remember, when he was at Chico State, which was really interesting because John Gardner was not, he didn't, nobody really read his books, but, well, maybe Nickel Mountain, but he was this great teaching writer and wrote a lot about writing. And then he died tragically on a motorcycle accident, very young. But Raymond Carver said that at Chico State, he could go in Sundays and just type on a typewriter in the office. Like John Gardner gave him the key to the office. So, because Carver had children and a wife and a job, it was really hard to write when you have those things going on. Yeah, so my second story is So Much Water, So Close to Home. And now that I think about it, it's another one that has less alcohol abuse, but there is a physical abuse aspect to it. I don't know if it's completely in the narrator's mind, Claire. But so the story is a man and his three buddies go fishing, and they trek a long way to go to their spot to fishing. I think they hike 3, 4, 5 miles, and there's a dead girl in the river, and they fish and camp. They tie her to something, and they drink and they fish and they drink and they fish, and then they come back and they call the sheriff, and they take the sheriff to where the body is. And the man goes home, and his wife is just absolutely, she's just completely lost. It's almost as if he goes on a fishing trip and a new person returns because she cannot understand how he did what he did. And they're getting phone calls. People are calling him,
Tying,
asking, yeah,
tying this abused, dead woman, who knows what happened to her before she passed, before she was murdered, tying her to the boat so that it wouldn't, so the body wouldn't float away, so they could finish the fishing trip.
it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. And the man, he just doesn't understand his wife. He does not understand how she's reacting. And he's saying, let it go, forget about it, forget about it. I didn't do anything. It's like I did nothing wrong. And she is just, and then as the story goes on, just in a couple of days, she's moving further away from him. And then she sleeps on the couch. And then at the end, she's in another bedroom and he busts down the door and stands there. So she knows he can get in there, I guess. But it's charged with some type of violence, which you don't, which isn't there anymore. It already happened to that girl. But it's almost as if there's something, and there's nothing that says that this man had ever abused her, um, or hit his wife, but he's mad as hell and he's going to express it in kind of an old-fashioned way. And there's something about another one of those stories, like, what the hell did I just read? And she goes to the funeral. She travels 120 miles to go to this funeral, almost as if to pay her respects for what her husband won't do. But it's another one of those stories it's just Raymond Carver. Like nobody else wrote stories like that I've ever read.
I want to point something out that I had forgotten to mention too that drew me to Carver because you just said something that reminded me of this, Jake, is that do you read that many writers who write about people who fish, who paint for a living, who are struggling to make ends meet, who make their husband breakfast? I know that sounds, come on.
Yeah,
These are people who he lends dignity to. Um, this story is the theme is about dignity,
yeah,
but if you could say the theme about Carver, which struck me, so when I first read Carver, I that struck me right away. But you know that with that kid in the early 20s at Long Beach, he's writing about people that nobody writes about. I know they're in the Pacific Northwest, but they're everywhere. And so I like how you said nobody writes like this, and even about people like this. I mean, would you agree with that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Sawmills,
Yeah, sawmills. There you go. Yeah.
you know, um, woods, and just there's a loneliness. I think I've always lived in the city,
Mhm.
but sometimes if you're ever driving somewhere, you think, wow, this person lives miles from the next person. Like driving through a rural road. He told those stories,
Mhm.
and that
I,
word dignity is important.
yes,
That these people matter.
and to your point, there's a story, and I'm sorry for interrupting, Jake, but there's a story called "They're Not Your Husband," and we're not talking about it in detail now, but it's a story about a diner waitress who has a husband, and just her work as a diner waitress server, and again the dignity and her work and her life and peering into that is another example, and too bad we don't have time to talk about that story because it's just memorable, but it's just another example of these characters that typical writers don't get into it. But
Yeah.
you're gonna say, Jacob?
No, I was gonna say that. I mean, I love that story just because you mentioned dignity, that she was a woman who had dignity, and she thought her husband did. That's why she started going away from him. It's like, wait a minute, I thought we were on the same page. I knew my husband. But that's why when she started pulling back, she's like, maybe I don't know my husband. Maybe the questions are like, maybe he was involved in this killing. I can't believe it, but maybe. So, and then when she goes to this funeral, it's like, isn't that what you're supposed to? I mean, but she's doing all the right things, and then as time's going on, she's pulling away, she's sleeping somewhere else, she's definitely apart from him, because in the end she's like, maybe I don't know this guy and we are not on the same page. And
Yeah.
it but Carver does such a great job, because you say, I know people like that. And you mentioned these other stories, like, it's because he writes, because he's going through a lot of things in his life. He's
Yeah.
drinking, he's losing marriages, and he's having a tough time keeping it together, and he's not writing for a while, and he's trying to figure it all. And so, yeah, I just think it's so beautiful, just because I felt like this is real. This is a real story that could happen to my neighbor,
Yeah.
to me, So, yeah.
And again, there's not a hero in it either. Like it happens, and that's why I thought it was kind of related to a small good thing where no one can stop it. No one is asked to stop it. Nobody, it's just what it is. It happened. And then they're there. Then the sheriff is like, thanks. Thanks, fellas. What's your phone number? If we need you. Okay, we'll take it from here. Because there's nothing. It's a void at that point. You can't save her. She's gone.
Yeah.
And we don't even know who did it. We just know at the funeral, an old lady says they got the person. They got the person. But it's a tragedy affects Claire, and maybe it might be, open an opening for her. I don't know,
Mhm.
but it stops at that point where he breaks down the door, and he doesn't move on her. He doesn't hit her. He doesn't even go into the room. He's just kind of saying, "I can do this."
By the way, I taught this story one year to students, and one of the students, so this is not me making this analysis. I thought she said something very interesting. She said, "This man just looks at this corpse, this dead young lady, as just an object that's
Oh
that's
yeah, yeah,
that's keeping him from finishing his fishing trip."
yeah, like a
She's,
traffic jam or something,
yes, and
or
she
a
said
dead deer they have to pull off the road.
yes, and she made a connection later. So there's a moment later where he pulls his wife. So he's like you mentioned, Jake, that he's not understanding his wife's trepidation and fear and concern. And he's trying to, come on, let's make love, and he pulls her close. And my student had mentioned, oh, he's objectifying his wife. He's ignoring what she's saying, and he just wants to have sex with her. He's objectifying his wife right here, like he objectified the young lady who was killed. And I thought that was an interesting connection, that I hadn't thought of. So
I think there's definitely something the way that's written when he tries to be intimate. It's like that's what they do. This is how they have physical moments of intimacy. And she's just like, no, no, we're not, that's over. Until there's something wrong. This dead girl in the river is between us now. So there isn't this thing like he's like sneaking up on her and like there is something that goes both ways in this that always has up until this point. And she's like, no, 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 no. I think that's what she says. No, 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 like three or four times.
by the way, if I lived 1,000 lifetimes, I could never conceive of a story like this.
I know it's
That's a
crazy.
strange story, if you think about it. Like, anyway,
Yeah,
fantastic.
amazing.
Yeah, amazing story. Okay, Jacob Aguilar, what are your thoughts? Speaking of strange stories,
Yeah.
I think what's coming next.
I think
Yeah,
it's funny, because I feel like we're kind of progressing to this story that I'm going to mention, which is Tell the Women We're Going. Because when I first read it, well, I had to read it a couple times. When I first read it, I'm like, whoa, this is like a different kind of Carver story. This is dark, and this is brutal and misogynist, and it's like, But he's so careful with all his words. I mean, it's like when you're sharing, Ruben, it's difficult to write a short story, I think, and it's a piece of art. You know, when you go to an art museum, you see these pieces and you interpret it. And this is this type of short story where you're like, whoa, what's going on here? But you have to go back to it and see the language that he's using regarding even the title. Tell the women we're going, like the women. You know, it's like sounds like an old old man saying, the women. You know, because that's not how women have names. They have personalities. They're people. And as the story goes on, these two friends who, Jerry and Bill, right? They're buddies. They've been with each other for all their lives. They grew up together. They shared cars. They shared women. When I read that, I go, that's weird. I never shared a woman with a friend. That's like a little odd. So it started getting a little odd, and then you see that Jerry, got married young, and he's the friend who he was the best man at Bill's wedding, but he was also the person who was kind of a little ahead regarding getting jobs, and but then he started drinking, but you see it heavily. And I think, as in all these stories, alcohol is a piece of it somewhere. Somewhere you find some alcohol, and because Carver dealt with that. But in this situation, even more so, they get drunk one day. They always go to Jerry's house to hang out, and one day like let's go get some more beer, right? Which guys do sometimes, right? And they go, and then they didn't know this was going to be a dark day, but they drunk and going to a bar and then looking for women, And I think Bill was kind of like, okay, this is my buddy. This is who I hang out with, and this I know him, and then of course it gets darker where Jerry he finds these girls and I'm not sure I should spoil the story, but death happens, right? And I think part of what I feel is as I was reading, I go, is this like telling you also that Bill is kind of going to be in that place in 2 or 3 years to be in a place where because the language kind of is like beginning. You know how you hear like these serial killers, they kill cats first and dogs and then end up killing people. It's like first is like you start dehumanizing women. You start calling them, they use these ugly words in the short story, right? Referring to women, and it's like, that's how when you begin to say they're not really people, and then you get to a place where you kill them, you know. And I feel like Bill is in that journey that he might get to that point where Jerry's already at. And maybe he's done it before. Before I thought, no, this is his first time. But I said it happened so fast and so easy that he may have done this before. And Bill may be on that journey too. And so I don't know if he is, or maybe he was, I don't know. But and maybe there's something that you guys caught that would say that he wasn't. But I just felt disturbed by it. I read it. I go, this is a different Carver story. I go, what am I to make of this? But I think one of the things that came out of it was just the way the language is being used towards women and calling them, I don't even want to say the words he used, but anyway, it was pretty bad.
Well, I don't think you're suggesting that don't call women. Uh, you're not suggesting that people who call them women,
No, no,
not actual names, are going to kill.
no.
You're saying that that's just an example
Yes.
of
Sorry.
a guy who's objectifying women.
Yes.
They're just
The
things.
objects, they're
They're objects. It's a clue
hmm
to their kind of, or at least Jerry's kind of
hmm
deadness and sense of, um, I don't know. He's disconnected.
Yeah.
He knows he is married, but there's something that kind of snaps in him,
hmm
kind of disconnects him, where he says, "I need to drink, and I need to." It's not just drink though; it's whatever follows after that,
Right.
which starts the drink and then moves
Yeah.
towards other
Because I think he
things.
needs the drink to get to that point, to get
Yes.
that energy to do that, what he's gonna do. Yeah.
But I agree with you that if you argue that maybe they've done this before because Bill says, is it, I'm not saying, I can see how you
Yeah.
could argue that
Yeah.
because it's like, do you need, and I forget the line, but do you need to get out? Do we need to do this? And it's like, yes. And they get out. These are two married people, children, lives now,
Yeah.
but they need to do what they have to. And I hate to say boys will be boys because most people don't do this, but don't you feel like this is Carver arguing about the mundaneness of evil, about
Mm.
how evil doesn't look like horns out of a head, like cloaks coming out of the shadows. Sometimes evil just looks like two guys who have been disconnected from society, just sort of kind of moving around. There's something about this story that just, there's some truth to it, just feels true. And you have to read it to understand. Obviously, we're not painting every guy guys who go out for beers like this, but these guys are different. Gerhard, what say you?
Yeah, it's kind of I mean, it just boom. You don't expect it. The first 3 pages feel like journalism. After I finished it, and I was like, well, okay, so that's like it's set up for you to just feel these guys have been buddies a long time, and they haven't been in trouble. There's nothing like they've done anything bad. They've gotten jobs. They've followed, what they was expected from them, go get a job, go buy a car. This is what you enjoy, watch television, drink beer with your friends and your wife. And but it is dark. It's really dark. And I don't know where that comes from. It's sort of shocking.
It was.
Here's a thought. Here's a thought. So I always thought of this story, like Jake Aguilar just said, like it feels different from the other Carver stories. I always felt that too. I always thought this is an anomaly. But when I reread it this week, the Seattle thing hit me when I read it. Seattle, as you will. Guess who was killing during this time? So he wrote this, I think, in the early 80s. Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer. Now, I'm just saying,
Wow.
maybe this was maybe not conscious, but subconsciously he's like, man, who would do this?
Yeah.
Kind of,
And Bundy
you
was
know,
like an everyday looking kind of guy, just a regular
I mean,
Joe.
everybody who's a serial killer seems to be the best neighbor in the world, right? They cut their
maybe,
grass.
Yep.
They,
yeah.
they give out little candy for Halloween. They're never loud. Unfortunately, they have something else going on. But I always joke about that. I'm like, that's not a bad neighbor because
Yeah.
everybody's always like, he was awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
It's weird. He was a great neighbor.
Oh,
Um,
I think you're alluding to BTK, huh? Cut the
which one's
grass perfectly, everything. Yeah, really, you cannot prepare for that last, I think,
Mm-mm.
sentence of this
but I just
story.
think they get caught.
What's that?
I think they get caught. I don't think that there's some kind of thing like, hell, okay, now don't tell anybody I did this. This is
Right.
what I do. I think I think it's just he snaps. I think it's
That's good.
kind of like he snaps,
I was
like,
hoping that they get caught. My hope was like, I hope these guys get caught.
oh, they get caught, I think.
Yeah.
I hope. I mean, after, I don't know. Now that I think about it, it's amazing that 10 pages can give you so much to think about.
Hmm.
Like, wow. And also, I thought of it like this is a really interesting thing, and I hope it doesn't take us off course, but um, a lot of Bruce Springsteen songs are kind of that middle class, you know, 18 years old, get a job, get married. And the song The River, Bruce Springsteen wrote it about his sister and his brother-in-law. And his sister and his brother-in-law was like, I'm not unhappy. I this is I work and I love my wife and we have kids and I coach little league. Like, but I think if you're an artist, sometimes, and I don't mean to say that against Bruce Springsteen singing those songs or Carver writing these, because there is dignity to all of them, But sometimes it's like I hope that it's not all that terrible. So when I drive by that house, there isn't somebody drinking alone, waiting to die because our husband, something like that. I just hope there's a little bit more, which, yeah, which gets me to the last little thing I wanted to say, but I'll wait for you to finish up, Ruben. Or do you want me to
Uh,
finish it now?
yes,
That
please.
train
Yeah,
of
please.
thought.
Yeah.
Train of thought, yeah.
Okay, so also I sent you things that I want to do. Chef's House, and
Oh yeah,
also,
do Chef's House. And I want to do where I'm calling from.
okay,
But
great.
I don't know, Jacob, if Jacob Aguilar, you read Chef's House, but
I don't.
Jake Gerhardt threw a curveball. It's okay. It's not in where I'm calling. It's not in what we talk about. But
Okay.
Chef's House is, I think, fascinating when you get a chance.
I'm gonna read it. I'll read it.
Jacob, check it
Yeah,
out.
so it's a
Interesting
woman
story.
who her ex-husband. is living he's a recovered alcoholic, and he's living in a friend's house called Chef, who's also a recovering alcoholic. And he kind of calls up his ex-wife, or maybe yeah, the ex-wife, and he's like, "You got to come out here and stay with me. It's amazing. It's beautiful, and I'm not drinking." And it's in California around Humboldt. You can see the ocean and Jack London's land. So she goes there, and they have this wonderful summer together, and then they get a phone, or no, they don't get a phone call. The owner of the house, Chef, comes by and he says, "I'm so sorry, dude." I forget the guy's name, but he's like, my daughter needs to move in here, so I have to ask you to leave. I'm so sorry." And at that
Jake,
point,
his name is Chef.
yes, his name is
Chef.
Shep. And so the guy, you could just tell that's enough to get him drinking again. And he's like, now he's fidgeting, he's not eating his food, right? Like this is a man who is like these characters that he writes about. He is a man who one thing can go wrong and send him back on that. And his girlfriend, his ex-wife, she stays with him. And we don't know how it goes, but she's there with him and talks him through it and says, "We're going to be okay." And he's like, "No, no, no, no." And you could just tell he's just a step away from drinking again. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that was because of being a hero, because the other stories, there's no one who can do anything heroic. They're just, that's the way the situation is.
Hmm.
In Chef's house, the ex-wife is the hero. She's going to be there. She's going to say, "Okay, I'm going to, we can get through this. It sucks. We had a great time," because the man talks about it. This is the best summer ever. This is the greatest thing. And the other thing I think it makes you think a lot about, it's there subliminally, but nobody really says it. But these alcoholics or anybody with drugs, gambling, anything, that every single day of your life is a new day, but also the regret. Like, I lost that. I lost that. I had money and it's gone. I would have more money if I didn't do that. You can only imagine how horrible a gambler feels, or somebody who's on drugs, especially just financially, like looking forward and thinking, "I don't have anything to lean back on because I spent it all on that." So Chef's house, that woman there with him, you can just feel, again, the writing is so perfect. You can feel the tension. You can feel this man is thinking, "I'm going to drink again. This is it." Almost like snapping.
And the woman, his wife, reminding him, "Hey, this is Chef's house.
Yeah.
He can do whatever he wants. He's asking for his daughter to," and he keeps calling her Fat Linda.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's really mad.
And his chef's daughter that's going to move into the house, and it's a good reminder, also, that you have to live in the moment and to appreciate what you have. In other words, Chef has given you this house. You have enjoyed this house pretty much rent free. Is there no thanks for that? Is there no appreciation for all this time you've had to spend with your wife who's come back? Or is it just anger that it's taken away from you? Um, it's such a beautiful story to
Yeah.
reflect on. Um, which is a kind of a really interesting dovetail to the story I want to close with. And
Yes.
I want to say that on its surface, where I'm calling from is about a drying out facility for alcoholics who have struggled and basically voluntarily have said, "I need help. Frank Martin, help me out with your facility I mean, up in the Catskills, right?" I forgot to point out the exact. We know Jack London lived right across the hill. I wish I should look at the actual geographical location, but you can see it's the beautiful hills of this area in which they decide Frank Martin's drying out facility. I want to say though that as you read it, it feels kind of hopeless. It feels hopeless. This is how I read it, and I've always read it. As much as I appreciate these people trying to get their lives back together. This is a story about stories. This is, if you read this, this is just guys telling stories. In particular, a guy named JP is telling a few stories. It's really interesting because this guy named JP in this facility is telling the narrator, "Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I fell into a well and I saw these birds flying out in these clouds." Just that story was fascinating. And then I thought I was going to be buried alive in this well. And then he tells a story about his wife and how he met her as a chimney sweep. She walks in as he and his buddies are drinking beer, and she has this black hat, and she's uh, sweeping this chimney, and you're just listening to stories. And people, this narrator just says, keep telling me stories. Tell me your story. And then one part in the story, Frank Martin comes out with a cigar in his hand, and he starts telling people about the story of Jack London. Very brief. He says, Jack London lived over there. He couldn't handle the stuff. It killed him, and he's better than any of us. And then he says, you should read Call of the Wild, and a sermon. That's a story. And it's just so it's such a cool device where you have all these different stories within the story. But I want to just say, because I don't want to talk too much, at the end of this story, where I'm calling from, which I feel is actually a pretty hopeful short story, because at the end, remember, JP's chimney sweep wife has not left him. She's still hanging in. The narrator's wife has not left him. This is a hopeful story. And at the end, the story in which the narrator leaves us off with is to build a fire. Talk about a story to leave us off with, in which really the story is about time. You only have a few minutes before you're going to freeze to death. You better build this fire because he's up in the Yukon. So Jack London, it's really cool. It's a really, again, a really cool story to leave with. Jack London his story is about a man freezing to death in the Yukon, and he has to build this fire. We all, if we're alive, we still have stories to tell. You're not hopeless. You still have hope. What a great story. It's always, if I had to pick one, I would say where I'm calling from, but tomorrow I might give you a different one. But today, where I'm calling from.
I like that.
Yeah, and she's the narrator's flawed. It's almost like he's pushing this woman away who sticks with him, but both guys have women who are helping. But at one point, his girlfriend drives him up and they walk in this Frank Martin's, and I'm reading this. They walked into Frank Martin's office and she said, guess who's here? And she drove him and dropped him off and said, you gotta stop drinking. You're too much. And then there's Tiny with so one of the things is that seizure that Tiny has that kind of messes him up a little bit. He's like, oh, what is this? And then Tiny can't eat his food and he finishes his food. It's almost like I don't think the guy wants to eat because he's afraid what will happen if he has another seizure. But it's a it's the best short story I've ever read in a drying out facility, that's for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was going to go with that. I thought it was so hopeful that to go along with what you shared, Ruben, as well, that you saw that there was hope because JP's wife came to visit, but I think her thoughts were, we're gonna go. And he goes, oh no, I have to stay a little longer, which tells me, oh, he really wants to get better. He could just leave, and she probably would have been okay with it because she wanted to take him. And he's like, oh no, I gotta stay a little longer. And I said, oh wow. And even the narrator at the end trying to figure out who to call, he's being active. He's trying to like, okay, I'm gonna connect with somebody so I could let them know where I'm at, and even going with the title, right? And so I don't know. I did feel as you did, Ruben and Jacob, that this is a hopeful story, and it's a good one. It's a good, it's a good one to end with for sure.
Excellent.
And he
I
stayed at a place like that. Like there's some
Mm.
of these stories are real, and I think that one is a little bit more real than some of the others. Like I think he talked about that.
And I think
Um,
we always hear stories of women just leaving or whatever, when the reality is they want their man to grow up and get together, and there's more of that I think out there, of
there-
at least in the beginning, there's for sure.
There's a really subtle thing here too that maybe I can draw up because you guys still want to talk about it. I'm down for it. There's a subtle thing in which the narrator has a girlfriend and JP's wife has a boyfriend. And a lot of people think that's the end. Oh,
Right.
you cheated on me, that's the end. But no, even if that happens, there might even still be hope to reconcile, which I thought was really interesting and how uh, it's humorous. There's something about Carver, even in the midst of this sad, he says, I thought about calling my wife, but I thought better of it. Then I thought about calling my girlfriend. I thought, no, I don't want to hear her complain. It's so funny.
Yeah. Great one.
Oh man. What
Here's
do
a
you,
picture
yeah.
of Duffy's, which is the drying out facility Carver attended. I
You have
think
that little ner you've been holding out on us like this?
Little nugget.
it's from
Wow.
a book called Carver Country, and I just picture them there,
Wow.
Just sitting
you
there
know,
telling stories.
just telling story, to get through the day,
Yeah.
to just say,
Because he even said, even if he told a story about throwing horseshoes, I'm in. I'm listening. It's
yeah,
like, which is true. What else are you going to be doing? You can't do anything else there except
It's
shake
so
and.
so human. It's the narrator says, just keep talking, JP. Just keep talking because and he says it takes my mind off my own situation. And sometimes you're just there, you just don't want you have nothing else left. You just want to hear it. You just want to hear a story. Um and I feel it's appropriate because this is Carver. There's plenty of stories of
yeah,
which to
there's a lot.
Hey, there's one called Errand, which is the last day, I think, of Chekhov. So he was very inspired by Anton Chekhov. It's worth reading, Errand, and it's really dramatic how Chekhov dies, and it's very uncarver-like. It's worth checking out. But there's so many we didn't talk about. Are these actual miles where he finds out how his wife has been cheating on him? It's there's some moments where you'll never forget. We didn't talk about what we talk about when we talk about love, where the guy eats rat poison and the fangs come out, his gums. There's some of these moments where you just never forget.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But don't
That's,
we agree? But I appreciate you. Any last words, Jacob Agler
I
or
just want to
Jacob
thank you
Gerhardt?
for both of you guys because I never heard of this writer, and I'm a history guy, so I feel like I'm learning so much even from you guys. A lot of our podcasts we've done a few together now, but this is like a nugget. I'm like I'm gonna read all this stuff, and I just mentioned it to another English teacher this week. He's a young man though, and he goes, I'm not sure about him. I go, oh, you got to read him. So I think I'm gonna buy a book and give it to him just because,
yeah,
yeah, because I'm like you're gonna love this guy, you know. So yeah, thank you guys. I really
yeah,
appreciate
it's
it.
great. Yeah, Reuben, great idea.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we could do it. And thank you for joining us, Jacob Gerhardt. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.